Good morning. Thank you for joining us. You are watching KUHS The Stream. This is the Weekend Boost, and I am your host, Paul Lane, the author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story. Guys, I'm so grateful to have you guys joining us today, and those of you who are with us and follow us on a regular basis know that I love to support CALMA, Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors. And this is the anthology that they recently put out at the first of the year. It's a collection of short stories, essays, and poems that is very, very good evening reading. If you like to read before bed, if you like some entertainment, it's very, very good stuff. Good, entertaining, really some very gripping stories and tales they're worth reading, and poetry. And I mentioned before, I have a couple of poems in there, and so those are pretty. I'm pretty proud of those. And those of you who know me know that I do like to write poetry, and so I would like to share a couple of my poems with you before we get started. And the first one I wrote for my wife a couple of weeks ago, and it's titled "I Love You More Than Guacamole," because guacamole is one of my favorite things in the world. I love you more than guacamole. I love you more than chips. I love you more than fresh menudo, like sugar on my lips. I love you more than juicy steaks. I love you more than wine. You make me feel so happy, dear. I love to call you mine. Love each minute spent with you, each smile that we share. It's like a summer day, my dear. I always know you care. So hold my hand and squeeze me tight, and I will squeeze you too, and share this great life that we live. I love my life with you. So that was one I wrote to my wife Dee, and I was kind of proud of it. I like that. And this one I wrote yesterday. A couple of days ago we were sitting out and the raindrops started falling, and I almost caught one on my tongue, and then I realized, man, you don't want to do that anymore. It's not a safe thing. And so I went in and I wrote this little poem. It's called Raindrops. I once caught raindrops on my tongue in years gone by when I was young, before the skies were filled with sprays and plastic filled our waterways. The food we eat and what we drink, the water from our kitchen sink, is toxic, filled with plastic. How have we become so drastic? We eat a credit card each week. Our health is all we seek. The acid rain is falling down and burning trees about the town. I wouldn't let a raindrop fall upon my tongue, no, not at all. The earth will show it cannot last. It's getting worse and changing fast. I know that sounds a little hopeless, but just the words that came to me, and I just like to share those. And if you guys would like to see more poetry, I'm considering writing a poetry book. And if you'd write in and tell me what your thoughts are on that. If you enjoy that poetry, and if you think you'd like to see more from me, please let me know. Reach out to us at the station. Reach out to me at info@paullane.net, and I'm trying to get my email fixed on my website, and hopefully we'll be doing that soon. Now, guys, I am so honored and so excited to have my guest, Carmen Baca. I consider her an old friend of mine. She's been on the show once before, and between now and then we've developed a friendship, and I always look forward to having conversations with her. Starts out with a 5-minute talk, and next thing you know, 45 minutes has gone by. But Carmen is she's a prolific writer. I mean, she's written 7 books, and she's had publications, over 100 publications printed in periodicals, contests, and different mediums. And so Carmen is someone who I have high respect, not only as a writer, but for her writing and for the style that she has, and for the words that she shares, and the way that she puts them in a way that you can grasp them and really chew on them. And Carmen, we're going to be talking about the book. Carmen, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we both wore red. That's cool with our red background.
I know, we're rebellious.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So Carmen wrote this book, Mystical Moments and Magical Encounters, and a collection of prose and poetry by Carmen Baca. Carmen, this book, I'm still going to have you help me walk me through this, because this deserves a good Amazon review, and I still am having trouble getting on, and I'm not technical, so maybe we can talk after the show. But I think this deserves a great review. Um, this book is really, I think, an extension of you. I mean, as I read through the pages of this book, I could see you um, expressing yourself in ways that you probably are very I don't know if uncomfortable or very outside of yourself. You know, when you wrote this book, you became a tree, you became a box, you became a fire, you became so many things within the stories in the book, and it was so interesting the way that you transcended reality and made your perspective from the tree standing on top of a mountain before it was cut down. Um, I just love the way that you did that. And is that something that you've always done as a style, or is that something that just kind of came to you recently?
The one about the box was written in about maybe 2018 or 19, so that one was one of the first ones that I wrote like that, animating an object and giving it life, because I wanted to convey the feeling that I felt in opening that box, but from a different perspective than my own. I
Yes.
wanted it to be from the box itself and the box's realization after a while that it was really, really special and it contained a lot of special things. I hadn't really thought about using personification or writing, about giving life to things until too many more until after the fires in our area. We had a
Yes.
really great, terrible, horrible fire here in 2022 that devastated something like 341,000 acres of all of our Norteño properties up here. And after the fires and after the evacuation, when I got to come home and I went for a short walk up to the monte behind the house and I saw the trees
Hmm.
and how half of them were dead and the other ones were dying and how they must have suffered that night. That's kind of it broke my heart and it put me into the core of the trees, what they
Man.
saw, what they experienced, and how they're immobile. They had to stand there and suffer through the whole thing and watch their brothers burn and wait and see if they were going to burn. And so the whole perspective, came from was born from that fire.
The tears of the tree. Oh my gosh, that story was gripping. Oh, by the way, my wife said she loved the whole book. I read the whole book out loud to her, so she
Oh,
really enjoyed it. But the trees. The story that you told from the perspective of the trees, standing there like arrows pointing into the sky, and their tears, the sap dripping out of them as the fire consumed them. I mean, it was, man, it really brought that fire to life. It made that fire into a being, the red monster.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was so gripping and so it was a real page turner. Um, there were so many examples of the trees coming to life and becoming real, beings. And I'm a tree hugger, so I mean I love going out and hugging the tree, and I love to go and put my hands on them and just to talk to them. And so when I read through that and read about that, it was like, oh man, I could almost feel the pain that those trees felt. And you told one quick a story of two trees that were found and they were like hugging each
Oh,
other.
yeah, yeah.
um, I almost got tears in my eyes. I'm almost choked up now, just thinking of the younger tree wrapped around the elder, and and meeting their demise together was uh, just really beautiful. I thought it was very beautifully stated and well put.
Thank you. That one came to me, as I said, when I was walking up behind the monte when we came back from the fire, and I happened to notice those two trees were still standing.
Mm.
I had been afraid that the mountain, that the house and everything was going to be burned by the time we came back, but the trees that were closest to our house didn't exactly burn completely, but they burned enough that they're going to die a slow death.
Mm.
And these two trees that I've been taking pictures of for my entire life, that
Wow.
I used to crawl up their limbs when I was younger, and that tree, the two trees that are intertwined are still standing behind the house. Not standing for long, unfortunately, because I think that they're burned enough that eventually they're going to fall.
Mm-hmm.
But when I saw them, and when I saw the tap, the sap, just the pureness of that clear sap flowing down their trunks, and I thought, oh, that night, what you must have suffered. And the words just kind of came from my turning myself into them, I think,
Yes. Yes.
just witnessing. And then of course we had been here up until April 22nd. We watched that fire from April 6th through the 22nd, slowly crawling, crawling, crawling toward us. And that night, to experience what they did, we didn't. At the very last minute, we fled.
The ready, set, go.
But yeah, but those trees couldn't flee.
Wow.
They had to stand there and witness everything and feel everything. And God knows what they experienced. I don't know. I'm kind of kooky in the way that I think that everything has a soul and everything has a spirit, and those trees must have been talking to each other. Stand fast, hold strong.
Yeah, I love the way you did that. You put feeling in each tree as if they were beings. And I mean, I think our ancestors really did perceive everything, even rocks, as beings, as something with the value, with an existence that has a core value and meaning. I really, I love that you put that into the stories and made each one of them real, made each one of them a part of the story, and not just an inanimate object, but an active participant in the story to make it what it was. The variety of stories that you told was really interesting. I see a lot of well, your second book, we're going to talk a little bit about El Hermano, the penitentes. A lot of people don't know what the penitentes are and were, and it was very interesting because I only knew the penitentes from an observer's view in my life. My father-in-law, my suegro, was a penitente in Rocky Ford, Colorado, in Manzanola, Colorado, and he was from Ocate. So, to hear the little bits and pieces that I would hear gave it a real mysterious tone and a real curious culture. And reading it, the Morada, and reading about I love the story of the box that you told. How the box was there and it was put in this room, and only once a year they would take out the relics and they would put them out, and the box started realizing how important it really was and how sacred the things were, and and that they would go and clean up everything, and how exciting it was to view life or existence from the perspective of this box, which was once a tree. And so that was very, very exciting and very interesting to observe, and just to I guess to gather for me. Um, Go ahead.
I think I don't know, when I write those stories from the perspectives of the objects, it's weird because I can be them. I make myself them.
Yes.
As I write, and I try to, and as I'm writing and trying to choose the words to see how to convey the experience. Of course, a box doesn't know human emotion, but from observing the humans, like the men when they went to perform their rituals at the Morada, and the box observing the unity, the brotherhood itself, and how they se abrazaban, and they used to pray together and eat together and everything, and the box observing this was able to find a bit of humanity within itself. And finally, like I say at the end, it discovered pain. It discovered the pain of humanity, because it was finally able to feel the emotion, especially when everything was over. When the men disbanded and the building was left vacant, and there's the box not knowing what happened to all of these hermanos and their wives, and
Yes.
just the loneliness of it all that
The
comes
emptiness.
with the end, because in the end we're alone. We meet our makers alone, no matter that we die with someone else.
Yeah, I think that's what really gripped me, was just the relation to the end, and to the termination of the things that we've lived with and for in our lifetimes. And so I really and I appreciated that because it made me feel, I guess, connected, and I could really relate to that box as something of not just of value, but of existence, of being, of almost a soul, like you say, of having a soul.
Yes. Right, right.
Yeah, that was very
Finally
cool.
discovering.
Um, the story that you wrote of the journal, I thought that was a very interesting story. The man kept his journal, and all through his life, he would write in the journal, and the journal would only know when he wrote in it what was going on, and it would observe, and um, it was mind blowing for me just because you never. I mean, even though a part of me realizes yes, that journal is really taken a life of its own. But to see it from the perspective of being told by the journal, it was just like, oh, that was a slick little way to present it. I thought it was very cool. Yeah.
Well, I wanted, that story is actually an allegory of the life of Jesus Christ. You notice the parallels as to where the child was born and how it had to be born in the barn because
Yes.
the parents found no shelter, and how he was persecuted throughout life because people didn't understand him and what he represented, and then how he met his end. So when I was writing it, I don't know, I just all of a sudden the idea of having his life story come out through the journal, it just kind of blew my mind, and I went with it. And yeah, I don't plan. I'm one of those writers who writes through discovery. I make it up as I go.
Yes.
So as I started writing that book and I was writing the story of the guy, I thought, wait a minute, this has got to come from a different point of view. And so that's when the journal kind of got a little bit of life breathed into it.
Yeah, I thought it was very, very tastefully done. It was um, very entertaining and very yeah. I could see the relationship to Christ's walk and his experience on in existence, I guess. Um,
And when he finally reached that particular place that he thought was going to be his, it called to him and he wanted to settle there. And then that freak of nature happened and people ended up persecuting him. He was to blame in their eyes, kind of like the way that Jesus was to blame for what the Romans and all the other persecutors of him thought that he represented. He was represented something bigger that they weren't prepared for. They didn't want to allow, because of the popularity that he had started acquiring at his age when he died. And so this poor guy coming into the community and doing his divining with the divining rod and finding water, and all of a sudden everybody turning on him and calling him a brujo. It's a reflection of society. If somebody's different from us, look what we do. A lot of times we end up persecuting the individual rather than celebrating him and trying to find out what makes the person tick and how can I be more like you.
Yep. And it's so interesting because that's very biblical. I mean, even the prophets would say, you killed all the prophets. You've killed all the prophets. And I've often said if Jesus Christ came back today, they'd crucify him by noon.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I agree with you there.
We've come to a point where a large segment of our population has grown to where they hate a liberal all week and then they worship him on Sunday, and it's really sad because those words of compassion and sharing and you fed me when I was hungry, you clothed me when I was naked, have gone by the wayside. And I don't want to get off track on our conversation, but it's very interesting to see how, and I don't want to give the story away, but at the end of the story it was like, oh man, what a sad commentary on humanity, that the man that saved them was at their mercy, and they took his life, and then to find out that the reason the wells all dried up, the water all dried up. Oh man, I sat back and my wife and I just sat there and chuckled to ourselves about that.
It was funny when I remember when I was writing it, because I knew that the end had to end tragically, and I couldn't for a while there come up with a reason why the water would dry up. And then I thought, aha, because I watch a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of TikTok videos, and I'm amazed by the power of water. And then we've got all these floods that we've been having up here since the burn scar.
Oh
Floods
man.
like we've never gotten since I've lived here all my life, and I'm turning 70 at the end of this year. And we've never had the kind of flooding that we're having now because of the burn, because we're living in the burn scar. And that was the idea that kind of popped into my mind at the end of that story. Well, it's got to be a flood. Okay, so how was it created? Well, man-made, of course. Man causes his own destruction quite often, and
Yep.
that was kind of the point of that story. And like you said, I think both of us share that in common. We like to write about things that are relevant. I had a poem that published not too long ago, and I'm going to republish that in my next collection, Congresos Celosos. You know that story about the crabs and how they pull each other down trying
Yes.
to reach the top? Well, that was the inspiration for that particular poem, because that's what we do, unfortunately, as humans.
Yes.
Rather than raising each other up, what do? Oh, we step on the people that we, below us.
Yes.
And cling to the skirts of the people above us so that we can get higher. So a lot of different things that happen, just general nature with the way we are as humans, pop up in our writing.
It really exposed
the
dark. I felt like, man, this really exposes the dark side of humanity, and how we're always rooting for the champion until the champion falls. And I always tell people, be careful about putting someone on a pedestal. Don't put people on a pedestal, because that only gives them a place to fall off of.
Yeah,
and so,
for sure.
I'm in association with a curandero. His name is Atek Patsin, and he's brilliant. I mean, he's written some books that are so advanced that it's like I'm reading Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, and I was talking to him one time, and I was just talking about how intellectual he was, and how just how smart he was to have written this book. And he told me, man, don't say that. Don't tell me I'm smart. Don't tell me I'm good. Don't tell me I'm great. Just enjoy the book. And so it was very revelatory, to go through this whole story and come to the end and see that this man who really lived his life with good intentions and really had every desire to help mankind and to be of service, ended up on the receiving end of their wrath. And so, yeah, I thought that was very, very well written, very well. I thought it was put out in a way that just made it very, very enjoyable and easy to read. There's so many good stories in this book, man. Guys, I'm telling you, get this book. Hey, Carmen, where can they get your book?
They're all on Amazon.
Amazon.
That one was published by Grant Hudson out of Clarendon House in the UK. And so it's on his website too, Clarendon House. I have my own page with all the books that he published. He published 4 of my books, and they're all there.
Oh, very cool.
Of all places, though, England.
Yeah, very interesting.
I know. Well, it goes to show that you don't need to publish with American publishers either.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about when you are publishing as a Latina or a Hispanic or Chicana woman, you don't have always the same opportunities, or people are not always as open to read or to look at your material as they might if your name was Johnson or Smith. And you've experienced this.
I look for those Chicano publishers as much as I can. I haven't found all that many out of the hundreds and, well, probably thousands of publishers out there, but the few hundreds that I've published with, I can maybe list on both of my hands the ones that are Chicano publishers, because there's not that many out there to give us a voice. So when I want to publish, let's say, in a horror magazine, well, then I kind of limit the Spanish words, or I don't include Spanish at all, and I just write whatever I'm going to write because I want to publish in that particular magazine. But when I want to publish my Chicano voice and talk about the importance of keeping traditions alive, of keeping our language alive, that kind of thing, that's when I hunt for Chicano publishers. And they're the ones like Somos en Escrito, the one that published Bella. They're the ones that help me get my voice out there, and help me share the stories of our people, los norteños.
Yes.
Even the boogie monsters, I want to keep them alive, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people know about La Llorona. Everybody's heard the stories about her, but have you heard about Lechuza or Malora or Malorga or any of the El Serpiente, otherwise
Yes.
known as El Viborón, you know? And there's all kinds of cultural folk tales that we could still be teaching our little children, even, you know, and keeping our culture and our traditions and our folklore alive in schools and so forth. And we just aren't.
No.
One of the things that I recall that shaped me as a human was starting off, we were talking about this the other day. Our parents drilled in us the importance of English and how we had to learn English and how we had to use English only at school and so on and so forth, so that we could be productive members of society in the future. And since English was really stressed by our parents back then, what happened? We ended up losing, you know, our fluency with the native language. And I'm hoping that even, you know, I can maybe even put some of that back into today's youth, and giving them also the realization that without your roots and without understanding your culture, you're going to lose your identity eventually.
Absolutely. You know, I love that you've re-sparked a lot of cultural identity that I think is being lost, and not just in language, but in cultural values. And you know, like talking about the penitentes is something I haven't heard in years and years and years until I came across your books, and to see them from the perspective that you write, you know, about the los hermanos and el mayor, and you know, just how there was reverence for what they did, and they didn't do it to be to show off how good they were. They did it because in their spirits, in their hearts, they were really giving their honor to their creator. And so I thought that was really I truly appreciated that, you know, being able to see it from that perspective.
Well, previous authors had, I think, sensationalized their forms of meting out penance to themselves, and they forgot the original purpose of the group. The group was actually one of our very, I think historically here in New Mexico at least, it was one of our very first community service organizations.
Wow.
But it was in the rural areas, and it was for us Hispanos. You know, they weren't really in the cities, they were here where I live now. I live on a dirt road, a 10-mile long dirt road that's filled with ranchitos. And a lot of us inherited our ranchitos from our grandparents and our great grandparents, and they got it from the Mora land grant and so on and so forth. So we've been here for centuries. And so the hermanos of the 1400s all the way through the 1800s provided the spiritual guidance. They weren't priests, they weren't pastors, they weren't lectors, but they were religious, and they provided the religious services and the religious guidance for the communities here, which is why they organized. And then, of course, they were, as I said, community service oriented. If anybody needed a barn raising, or if somebody's house burned down and they needed to pick up a collection or whatever, I've got my dad, the brotherhood that existed here, I have their record books dating back to 1850.
Yeah.
And you can see how way back in the day they donated a penny. And then after a while they were donating a nickel. And then before you know it, 25 cents. And then 50 cents. That was kind of where it stopped. They really didn't function any farther than that. But their donations were marked, you know, to help this particular individual because her husband died, and to help this individual because he broke his arm, this and that. So that everything was documented as what they did as far as their services were concerned. And then they even wrote their rules down and how they planned to live as hermanos, which was to emulate the life of Christ and do good things.
Yeah. You know, I don't mean to jump around, but as you're talking, I had visions of, you told the story of when you were a little girl and your father said, someday this will all be yours. And when I read that, man, I got choked up because, you know, it was just so powerful to see a young woman there with her father standing there on this beautiful plot of land that subsequently ended up in cinders, and um, especially getting to it at that point in the book after having read everything in the book, and you sprinkle stories of the fire throughout the book, and so um, when I read that passage, it was really emotional, I guess, for me. I guess I was very attached to the story by then.
It was an emotional moment I've never forgotten. I don't know, I was 10, 12 years old, an only child. My dad never had the sons that he should have had to run the ranch. So who was there? Me, little old me.
Mm-hmm.
I thank God that I ended up marrying a man that loves the ranch as much as my dad did.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that's been pretty much maintaining everything since the passing of all of our parents actually. But yeah, to look out there now and see the burn scar and say, this is what I'm going to pass on to my kids, and they to theirs. By the time they pass it on to theirs, it should be repaired. They say that forests take about 20 years to recover.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm probably not going to see it in its former glory the way it was as I remember it as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see even now how the river has shifted. It's nothing like the way it was when I was a kid and I used to play in the water of the river. It's it's eroding. The banks are getting huge. It's taking the topsoil off. The
Wow.
debris that comes with the floods just stays there. You need heavy equipment to move it half the time, and so there have been a lot of changes in these last couple of years that, of course, none of us expected and none of us wanted. And yes, other people have disasters. I pray for the people still in North Carolina and California and even Hawaii. But I noted also that we share something with the Hawaiians who lost their properties and their places during their fires. We all inherited, and we inherited centuries ago, and that's what makes our loss, I think, more poignant,
Mm-hmm.
more hurtful to us,
Mm-hmm.
because we've lived here forever. Our grandparents, I'm living on the very spot where my grandparents and my great grandparents and my great great greats lived,
Wow.
you know?
Wow.
But it's not the same anymore.
And in 1860, that land was Mexico.
Yeah, yeah.
It's yeah, that's another story. But yeah, it's
Here we go.
yeah. I always tell the story of how my grandfather was a first generation American, and his father, my great grandfather, was Mexican. They were born on the same land,
Mm-hmm.
and before it was Plaza de Leon, and now it's Walsenburg, Colorado. And so it's a very interesting dynamic that's common in the norteños and the southern Colorado
Yes.
people.
That's one of the things that I find really cool about what we share. I've got relatives, you're talking about Wassenberg and Rocky Ford and Manzanola, and
Mm-hmm.
I went to all those places as a kid because Primo this one and Prima that one and Tio this one and Tia that one lived in all those places. Brighton,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, uh, Pueblo, all of these places in Colorado. Every time we'd take a summer trip up to Denver, we'd have to stop at Rocky Ford to see Prima, Carolina, and then we'd have to go to Rocky Ford to visit Tia Clofes and so on and so forth. And
Wow.
and then we had a Martinez family reunion here a few years ago when all the Martinezes from Colorado came down over here,
Wow.
and they actually had like about a 600 person family reunion up there in Denver,
Oh, how cool, man.
with all of us that went up there the year before.
Mm.
So the migration, of
Yes.
all of us norteños and all of you guys up there, we share a special bond, all of us.
Yes,
And I know
absolutely.
so many of the relatives from Colorado that they always come back. They always have to come and visit the ranch, to recapture old memories. I would think, to get a little bit of nostalgia of what it was like, what it was like for all of us when we were little and we used to play in the sequias and fall on the cactus and everything.
Yeah.
Those those are the special memories I try to capture as well.
Nah, no kidding. That's interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah, just the stories of our growing up and the things that we learned, and um,
It's not the same anymore.
no,
our kids and our grandkids won't experience, more than likely praying with los hermanos or, doing certain traditions that were done in the past. I don't know many people that still keep las cabañelas, but I do.
Hmm. What are cabañelas?
It's a way of predicting the weather, and
Oh,
you
yes.
start. Yeah, remember that? My
Yes,
dad taught
yes.
me. We used to keep the cabanelas every year, so I still do it.
Talk about Corte de Nubes. Man, that was a really cool story, man. Your mother was one, and you're one.
Well, it doesn't. It. As a matter of fact, I even prayed in my bed last night because we were getting a major hailstorm in the middle of the night. I woke up with the balls falling on the roof. You know how it is when you have a pro panel roof. It sounds even louder than what it probably was, or bigger than what they probably were. But it sounded like rocks.
Mm.
And of course, I had to get up and say my prayer and face the four directions because we have a very ill steer. He's 28 years old and he's on his death throes as we speak. Y no puede andar, el pobre.
Mm.
So I was praying for him last night because I knew he couldn't make it to shelter in the hail that was falling. So I got up to pray the Cortando las Nubes so that I could perhaps cut the hail and give a little bit of peace to this poor steer that's dying. I didn't want him to suffer.
Mm.
But yeah, these are certain things that a lot of people they've never heard of. I
Yeah.
found a teeny tiny article on Wikipedia about the Gradio Graned, and that's how I found out that the practice came to us from Serbia. The Serbs started the practice, and they shared it with our Spanish from Spain ancestors, and we brought it to New Mexico.
Yeah.
And as far as I knew, around here anyway, my mom was the only one that could still perform the deed. And watching her, I learned how to do it myself. So it's something that I still do here and there.
Wow.
She taught me how to do different, well, she used to visit a curandera too. So I learned how to sobar for empacho and
Mm-hmm.
quitar mal ojo, if you believe in that kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a few things that I can do here and there, not completely.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Everything from the past to me, now that I'm vieja, is interesting.
Yeah.
And I would like to preserve it, which is basically why I write, really, to preserve what I can, and hopefully someday, the youth that didn't live through the times that we did will read the books, your books and my books,
Yeah.
and discover what it was like back then for their grandparents and great grandparents.
Exactly. Guys, that's exactly why I do this show, because I know that if I died tomorrow, my works will still be here. And long after I'm gone, someone's going to be able to pick up this book and learn about the cultural lifestyle that happened in northern New Mexico, and the stories that people shared, and stories of curanderas, and stories of serpientes, and I mean so many different very interesting stories and anecdotes and tidbits of information. Um, Nothing haunts my recollections more than those men's voices echoing inside me as they did Cañoncito in those Friday afternoons. Now, I highlighted little bits and pieces here as I read the book, because there's just so many just tidbits, just so many gold nuggets that are in the book. Sacred Evolution. I mean, there's just so many different stories and so many different like quips, and just such interesting little topics to share.
Right.
Guys, if you're just joining us, you are watching KUHS The Stream, and this is the Weekend Boost, and I am Paul Lane, your host. We are talking to author Carmen Baca about her book Mystical Moments and Magical Encounters, a collection of prose and poetry by Carmen Baca. Guys, I'm telling you, one of the things I love to do when I go to bed is I love to get a book and just read before we go to bed. And I like to end my day on a positive note. And there were so many stories of hope, so many stories of enchantment. I love that when I think of the land of enchantment, this book really comes to mind.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, that was my impetus for putting all those particular stories together. Miracles. I
Yes.
I can swear, I really, really do think that I have seen ghosts, or I am visited by spirits, or I have seen miracles performed. Believe me, don't believe me. No importa.
Yep.
If I believe them, if I saw them and I can't explain what I saw, it's a miracle. And I think they exist, and that's kind of what I wanted to say in that book. Allow yourself to be open to possibilities, maybe
Yeah.
that there is a higher power out there, and that there is, hope, especially in these dark times right now.
Yeah, yeah. I know as a Catholic that the Pope has recently passed away, and so I know that there's a lot of change that's, well, I don't know if change is the word, a lot of, new things coming. There's going to be a new Pope assigned, and I don't know how this has affected you as a Catholic, but, I'm sure that it has some impact on you personally, having the Pope pass away.
I think it's quite apt that we decided to have this particular interview on the day that they buried him.
Isn't that
And then my
interesting?
last book ended up publishing on Palm Sunday. I mean, not Palm Sunday, Ash Wednesday. So the whole ritual, I mean, the whole time of Easter is just filled with memories and rituals of what I experienced in the past that I don't experience too much anymore. So for me, the religion has become kind of, I guess, more mainstream
Mm-hmm.
to apply to everybody, rather than the special times that I remember with Los Penitentes, and how it was just for us Chicanos, for us Norteños, just a little group of us that everybody was at the time, just simple farmers, simple ranchers, and we got together to pray in this quaint little adobe house. And it's not like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You have these cathedrals, and you have the stained glass, and you got everybody pomp and circumstance. And I prefer the simple prayer,
Mm-hmm.
the spiritual. I'm not much of a churchgoer, so I guess you could say I'm a lapsed Catholic in that respect. My church is the trees behind my house.
Yes.
If I want to pray, I go out into the monte and I sit there on those rocks that are black now with the hollín, and I look at those trees, the ones that are still standing, and I can marvel and I can give thanks that God gave me this life to live on this particular mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and not to mention the fact that I live 20 miles away from any church. So if I'm going to pray, I'm going to pray here at my house, behind
Mm-hmm.
the house, in the monte, by the river. That's my church.
And I think that you're more close to the Creator and to creation in that natural setting than any place on earth. I mean, really,
I agree.
like you say, the grass has a soul, the trees have a soul, the rocks have a soul, el tierra,
Mm-hmm.
everything, and um, to have that kind of a perspective, I think enriches you in your quest for contentment in life, in your quest for understanding in your spiritual growth. I mean, in many many ways, I think that a brick and mortar structure doesn't necessarily have any more or any more powerful presence of any deity, whether you call it God or whatever you want to call it, creator, grandfather, whatever you want to call it. I personally feel like when I'm at the lake and I just come up to a tree and wrap my arms around that tree, and people are going by and saying, "What's this guy's problem?" I don't care. My
Yes,
fulfillment
yes.
is within that tree and within my experience, and what I walk away from, with after I've had that experience is
Peace.
joy, peace, calm,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Right. You
resolve.
can feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I really appreciate that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me, and it doesn't have to be, like I say, brick and mortar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Go ahead.
I was going to ask if you mind if I read you one of my last poems that
No,
isn't in
please.
that book. I entered this one in a contest in December, and it actually won grand prize, believe it or not. But it's called Chismosa Orgullosa.
Uh-huh.
Soy norteña from the land of enchantment, where magic rules and monsters dwell, where our antepasados shared chistes to fascinate and cuentos over which to speculate. An only child amidst grown-ups mostly, I eavesdropped, poniendo oreja to the plática, hoping algo supernatural or paranormal came up. If it didn't, I made myself known. Mitote I tuned out. I didn't need to know who did what to whom, where, when, or why. I was wrong. Now, as a weaver of tales, I could have used that material rich with details. Instead, I fabricate varied and sundry stories around those fragmented, pointed memories. Disjointed, incomplete moments pop up in patches. A scene here or there comes to mind with disquietude, a powerful emotion. My mother's tears, a tia's angry words, family feuds. Few secrets are remembered, but motley threads interlaced to tell a story worthy of writing. Any story I weave from those images gives insight to pieces of the human experience. Universal stages, emotions, ordeals, and events shared by all intertwined with variations unique to us. An insular gente rooted through herencia, sustained by querida querencia. I took part in traditions, customs, and rituals, heated superstitions, dichos y refranes. Unraveling more as time passes, I preserve them in my cuentos to keep them alive. Have you heard of Grada Branterel, que cortan las nubes? What about curanteros or parteras, moradas y hermanos penitentes, or la sociedad de las Verónicas? Some of us still exist, but we're a dying breed. Not even those of our culture will remember when we're gone. As the last Veronica of our sisterhood, one of the few hail defenders who can cut storm clouds, and one who learned poco curanderismo, I thread my eccentric knowledge into my tales. More fun to weave are the retellings of chistes y cuentos, adivinanzas y leyendas shared by elders of my youth. Some entertained, others taught lessons, all featured local folklore. Villains mostly. The monsters, ghouls, spirits, and creatures our parents set loose on us in horrifying tales with gruesome ends to malcriados que no se portaron como la gente. My challenge lies in conveying our native childhood fears of Chicano boogie monsters. I'm the elder now, handing down my written heritage, precious as any family heirloom, bisabuela or bisabuela made in hopes mis chismes will pass through generations. As chismosa, I'm the historian, the weaver of chistes, chismes, y cuentos de mi raza. In my youth, to be chismosa was equal to being a mitotera, las dos sin vergüenza. In my old age, I'm proud and humbled to bear the title of chismosa, collector of chisme.
That was fantastic, man.
So here I am, coletando chisme between me and you.
Oh, that was beautiful, man. That was very moving. Had so many details and so many things that brought reminisce. You know, I reminisce in the book as there were words that I wanted to ask you about. Antepasados.
Antepasados.
Yes. What is
ancestors?
Ancestors.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
In this, I was telling you that I'm on the hunt for Chicano publishers. And so I found a publisher that put together this book not too long ago. As a matter of fact, it's becoming quite the bestseller, actually. It's got selections by Sandra Cisneros, Irene Blea, and me. I actually have a poem in this one, too. And it's about our language and how our language, I'm proposing that we call our language rascache. Instead of Spanish or whatever. We need to call it rascachismo. It's a fitting word for it.
Yeah, that's kind of a new slang word for Spanglish, huh?
Well, I didn't come across rascachismo until maybe a couple of years ago. And my goodness, it's us. It's definitely us.
Yes.
Rascachismo pertains to everything Trasco about us. And so in this particular poem, I used as many of our old words as I could throw in there because, like you say, we're forgetting them. And there's another one that I sent recently to the Latino Book Review, and that one too is it's called Chicano Code, and it's about how we speak our Spanglish, how our Spanish, the one that we embraced at the very beginning as coming from Spain and Mexico, and then combined with Nahuatl and with indigenous Indian languages, and now we're combining it with English and turning it into Spanglish, you know. So that poem is I'm hoping it gets published. It's called Chicano Code. A ver.
Oh, wow, very cool. Good title too.
I gotta send it to you so you can read it just for the heck of it.
My gosh, I can't believe this hour's gone so fast. I want to.
See what happens when we start talking?
I know.
Mitote.
This is your latest book, El Hermano. Now, guys, I'm telling you, if you don't, have you ever heard of Los Penitentes and you've ever had any curiosity, this book is entertaining. I'm telling you, man. Jose, and his group of friends, they got themselves in a whole bunch of crap, and they, you know, it was in a time long ago when young men looked up to their fathers in a different way than they do now, and the the culture that they shared was very, very family oriented and very, very valuable. I think in a different way, the word valuable, it takes on different meaning when you see it in this context, because you wrote this book in a first person perspective, and so, you know, having grown up and you know, being, you know, los Veronicas, and the culture that was there was mystical and almost magical, and you know, the young boys saw El Muerto. You know, just the experiences that they have in this book. Guys, I am telling you, you gotta have these two books in your bookshelf. They're fantastic reads. What do you have any words that you could share about this book that were really, you know, just help people to grasp why this book would be something they should have on their shelves?
It's a valuable part of our history that's slowly disappearing. You don't see a lot of hermanos penitentes nowadays. Few here in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, as far as I know. But it's a practice that's slowly dying out, and it's an important element of our culture that we shouldn't allow to die out. I'm so grateful when I meet these young men in their 30s that are active penitentes, and they're actually trying to keep the tradition alive for their children and their grandchildren. And I just see it as another important element of our culture that we're going to slowly let die out if we're not careful.
Yep.
Just like we have let so much else die out.
Mm-hmm. So many boys in the characters in the story all have intentions of becoming penitentes and novios or novices. Novicios?
Yeah, and novicios, yeah,
Yes.
the novices. And they did, every single one of those. As a matter of fact, toward the end of the book, you see a picture of the procesión. And in that procesión, you see all of the men well, the older men that are in that particular photograph. Those are pretty much the characters of the book. Those are the hermanos. They were all my dad's primos hermanos, and
Yeah.
they're all gone now.
And they're all gone. Now, is the penitentes something that's exclusive to Colorado and New Mexico, or are they nationwide or worldwide, or do you know?
Well, they are predominant in European countries, Spain and Italy.
Oh.
You should check out, I gotta send you some links to some videos that I've been finding on TikTok de los procesiones.
Yes.
There's like thousands of them. And the people line the streets to watch them pass by in their ceremonies.
Really?
Well, ours here in New Mexico and the southern Colorado, they're very secretive. They're almost everything that they do entre
closed doors.
ellos mismos.
Yes.
Yeah, in closed doors. We're invited to certain things like praying the estaciones and attending las tinieblas on Good Friday and that sort of thing. But we're very limited into how we participate with them. Well, in Spain and the other countries, the babies, even babies, boys and girls, are inducted into the Penitente Brotherhood, and you can see them parading down the streets with the grampos.
Wow.
It's awesome. But we've always been very private here. For some reason, our hermanos have always held it very close to their chest, probably because of that initial persecution, because of the sensationalism that existed with those authors back when the penitentes here were first discovered.
Yes.
And they were seen as cultish or something negative.
Yes.
Rather than a positive and religious society.
Yeah, they saw the supernatural as a threat or as something, the unknown, or something that might be harmful to them. And in essence, really, it was just a different level of spirituality, um, and a different walk that people select that choose to or choose to make this walk. And a lot of people who don't understand it see it as negative, and so it's very, very. I mean, it was very entertaining, just the things that these boys do, and then they have to, he has to confess to his father. uh,
But that was the ideal time to live too. You know, morals and standards and ethics were so important back then.
yes.
You didn't want to disappoint your parents.
Oh,
You
yeah.
didn't want to get that look.
And then they had their commitment to the Catholicism, and so after Jose had to confess to his father what they had done before, he had to go and confess it to the church, to the priest too.
Yeah.
I thought that was I chuckled as I read that, and it's like, oh man, I didn't want to put the book down. I'm not kidding you. It's such a well written book, and it's so entertaining, and it was refreshing to see this perspective of the characters as a story unfolds, because it really brings to life this culture that we have very little knowledge or exposure to. So I really
Right.
appreciated
Especially
that.
these days.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There were a lot of details in the book that I thought were revelatory and were very informative for me. My wife has never been exposed to the Catholic religion, and a lot of this was I knew about through my childhood and growing up, and so I was able to really, as I read, put the book down and say, well, let me explain to you about confession, and let me explain to you about what the penitentes did, and I knew my limited perspective, but it was very interesting, and it's very important, I think, that this cultural segment of our society, that people read it, especially if you're Catholic. This book is really entertaining, and it's very informational, and it's things that you probably never thought about within your own faith. And so I really, really think that it's not just an entertaining book and an informative book, but it's a very, very fulfilling book to read, especially when you think about our culture and our history. And um, my daughter lives about 20 minutes from the santuario. So, Easter weekend, they all go up the road past her house to the santuario, and they can't even get out of their house all day long. They have to stay
Oh,
home
yeah.
that day. And um,
As a matter of fact, I found a post on Facebook that I'll have to send you also, if you can see it somehow, because I know you're not connected to Facebook, but they actually filmed a piece of a procesión with the penitentes singing, so that you can actually hear that the tone and the feeling that the alabados give you. I
oh
was
yeah,
surprised that they allowed themselves to be filmed. But these are a more modern group, I think. You could see that the members were younger.
Mm.
So, but it was interesting. I was floored when I came across it on Facebook of all places, and I could hear the alabado, and it just, the chills right away ran down my spine with the memory of what it was like listening to my dad and my uncle and all their voices,
Yeah.
combined in prayer. You have an excellent author of penitente, so that you can understand more of them. He lives in Pueblo. Se llama Ruben Archuleta,
Ah,
and he's got several. In fact, he loaned me he loaned me that photograph of La Santa Muerte for my first book. But anyway, those are some of his books.
Well,
He's
okay.
got about 4 or 5 books of Los Penitentes. Check out his website.
Okay.
That's where he's got photographs of all of the artifacts and processions and you name it. He's an excellent author up there. And right in your own backyard.
No
Por
kidding.
Dios.
Just a couple of blocks, a couple hours down the road.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Guys, we are out of time. I knew this was going to be a fast hour.
I know.
Thank you so much, folks. Thank you for joining us. You know, we've been talking to author and my friend Carmen Baca about her two most recent books, El Hermano and Mystical Moments and Magical Encounters. Get these books in your collection. Go to Amazon and order your books. Get them, read them, embrace them, because they have so much powerful and useful information. Carmen, thank you so much. You know,
Thank you.
I always end my show with my slogan, and that is that everybody's looking for a hero. And if you can't find one, be one. Carmen, you exemplify that, man. Thank you so much for bringing to life these things that so many people have thought were gone forever. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Yes, I'm grateful. Guys, you are watching KUHS The Stream. Stay tuned for very good music, very good entertainment for you for the rest of the day. I am Paul Lane. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.